changes calling, but you need healing now for all good reasons. The change is coming. Well, change is coming for all good.
Called this conference today because it is my pleasure to announce the appointment of Peter Reichard as the new Deputy Police Chief for the New London Police Department. I will briefly overline the time frame that we followed for this appointment, the reasoning for Mr. Reichard's selection, and then I will introduce the police chief who will introduce Mr. Reichard, after which I will talk briefly about the restructuring and restaffing in both departments, police and fire, and then take any questions that you may have. On January 4th of this year, former Deputy Police Chief Marshal Seeger was informed by the administration that his contract would not be renewed. At a press conference later that same day, we announced a restructuring taking place in the police department and that we would move as quickly as possible to fill this vital and essential public safety position. On January 27th, at the same time that we announced that the city was in a significant budget crisis, we announced a hiring freeze on all non-essential city staff. 4 positions were designated as essential that would still be filled: the tax assessor, the deputy fire chief, the deputy police chief, and 1 police captain. This was reported in the day on the 28th and several times since, particularly as the administration discussed being close to making a selection, responding to numerous media inquiries as to when a selection would be made. On February 3rd, the position posted publicly through our personnel office and on the city website, and applications began being submitted for the position. On March 7th, with the application process being closed, the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association conducted a training and experience evaluation and rating of all of the applicants. Those who passed that run of the evaluation process on March 23rd proceeded to an oral examination conducted by the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association. On April 10th, following the report and a certified list from the personnel office, 1 applicant, the applicant who in the end has been selected, was listed by the Connecticut Chiefs as highly recommended, with 4 other applicants being listed as qualified and recommended. After discussions internally with the administrative staff and Chief Administrative Officer Glover and myself, and the police chief and personnel coordinator, 3 candidates from that list were chosen for direct interviews. Those interviews were conducted on April 10th between Police Chief Ackley, Personnel Coordinator Welsh, and the 3 candidates, operating off of input from the administration. I also, later that same day, testified to the Council's Public Safety Committee that we were close to a choice in filling this position, and also my reasoning for the change in this post. On April 13th, I interviewed Mr. Reichard personally after a recommendation from the police chief and the personnel coordinator that concurred with the finding of the Connecticut Chiefs Association that the highest recommended candidate for the position was Mr. Reichard. That being stated, I interviewed him and him only. At the conclusion of an extensive interview, I was thoroughly convinced that he was the right person for the job. I offered him the position, he accepted, and I signed his appointment forms that were submitted to me in the certified list from the city's personnel office. Last Friday, on April 20th, final employment terms were settled between the city and Mr. Reichard, and he gave notice to his current employer. The announcement was delayed to today only because of reports in the past that most of the major announcements, particularly on staffing in the police department, had, by happenstance, occurred on Fridays. So to avoid that controversy, we postponed any announcement until Monday so that it would be free and clear of any controversy. At no time from January 4th, when the announcement was made that the former deputy police chief would not be retained, until Friday, April 20th, after all of this process that I've described, did the administration receive any notice, formally or informally, from the city council or any individual councilor that this position was not anything but an essential public safety position that we should fill as soon as possible. And I firmly believe that this position is a vital public safety position for the City of New London. In reasoning I gave before the City Council on April 10th, I believed that to have a cohesive management team in the New London Police Department, and also to ensure that internal investigations in the department were conducted fairly by someone with an outside perspective who was highly experienced in internal investigations and brought to the post varied experience and perspectives, I believed that a change was needed, and these were the qualities we looked for in the person who would be selected. Mr. Reichard was the highest endorsed candidate by the Connecticut Chiefs, our chief, and the personnel office. And I'm profoundly impressed personally by the discussions that I've had with Mr. Reichard about his approach to community policing, approach to internal investigations, and I believe firmly that he will bring a profound sense of honor and integrity to our department, and he has my full confidence as our new Deputy Chief. But to introduce our new Deputy Chief, I would like to introduce the Chief of Police in the City of New London, Margaret Acker.
I think the mayor's covered it quite well. Pete comes to us from a vast amount of experience, having served 22 years with the City of New Haven and coming highly recommended from the city to us. He currently is employed as the Vice President of Protective Services for Corporate Security for Bank of America, and they are going to lose a fine employee, but much to our gain. So I'm here today to say, based upon the Connecticut Chief's high recommendation, I concur with that. I thank the city for realizing the need to have a professional organization. You need proper structure in place, and I very much look forward to moving forward with Pete Reichard, and I thank him and I welcome him.
First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Mayor Finizio for this appointment. I'd also like to thank Chief Ackley for her recommendation to the mayor for this appointment. And I look forward to working with Captain Crawley and all the 5 members of the New London Police Department. I look forward to the restructuring that's going to be taking place in the department and moving forward with that and some community-based policing issues in the city and working on reducing crime through the city, through some of the different methods we've tried in different parts of the country and the city of New Haven that have seemed to work. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reichard. Today's announcement, while not a full, complete public safety team, we are still waiting on the promotion of one captain's position, and an exam for that position has been scheduled for May 24th. But effectively, from an administrative standpoint, the public safety management team for the City of New London is now fully assembled. I have total confidence that this is the team that we need in place to manage these 2 vital public safety departments as we move forward. In the New London Fire Department, Chief Ron Samuel will be retiring after 41 years service with the City of New London and 27 years service as Chief of the New London Fire Department. He is the longest serving chief in New England and a fine public servant for the City of New London. We continue to thank him for his service, and his departure will be a loss to the City of New London. But we are very pleased that we have in place an experienced Deputy Chief in Henry Kidd to help manage this department during the most significant transition that it will undergo in 3 decades. With the addition of Deputy Chief Reichard, I am equally confident that we now have a management team in place in the New London Police Department that can manage the complicated restructuring taking place in that department. As I've said numerous times, I believe that these transitions and these restructurings will lead to a stronger public safety apparatus for the City of New London, and that in particular, the New London Police Department will become a model for the state and the nation on law enforcement integrity and excellence. At this time, I take any questions you might have.
Mr. Reichard, a question?
Absolutely. I'll direct questions to anyone who can appropriately answer the questions.
So we're all getting to know Mr. Reichard today from the news reports, including those that said that he was asked to leave his position at the New Haven Fire Department because of some personnel incidents, telling someone he would break their knees, I believe, was one report, and also that he had emailed a newspaper reporters threatening to have him arrested. Could Could Mr. Reichard comment on those, on these instances and his departure from the New Haven Department?
I officially retired from New Haven in January 2010. There was investigations conducted into those two incidents you're talking about, and they found nothing.
I'm sorry,
They had no findings.
Could you tell us, did you ever write an email to suggest that you have a reporter arrested?
The email was replied to a newspaper order, yes.
It was threatening to arrest him?
It was not a threat, sir.
A suggestion that you arrest him? Jeez.
By the way, Mr. Reichard, this is David Collins.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
The New London Dad.
If I have the floor for one more minute?
Sure.
Can I ask you a question? Your resume indicates your law enforcement background as a staff analyst to the City Council New York Public Safety Committee. It looks like the dates coincide with the time that you were also at NYU. Could you talk a little bit more about that job experience? Was it a full-time job? And
It was a full-time position. It was a very significant position, in fact. I was hired in my last semester of a Master's in Public Administration program at NYU, which was also a full-time program, but it was an evening program because the MPA programs at most top universities are usually afforded evening classes because they usually contemplate that they are geared towards mid-level professionals who are looking to increase their resumes as they move up through the administrative ranks. I was hired as a criminal justice analyst. The official title was legislative policy analyst, but I was specifically assigned to fire and police matters. The committees that I served were Fire and Criminal Justice Services and also the Committee on Public Safety. These committees had oversights of the New York City Police, Fire, Corrections, Probation, and Juvenile Justice departments. In that role, we went through 2 budget cycles. I also served during the attacks of 9/11 and their aftermath, which included significant restructuring in the New York Fire Department, and also examining numerous police procedures in the New London Police Department. The most significant piece of legislation that I worked on and assisted in drafting was a bill in the City of New London to collect data from police stops in an effort to combat racial profiling in the City of New York, which was signed by then Mayor Giuliani on September 6, 2001, 5 days before the 9/11 attacks, which is why I had such a firm commitment and made my first executive order as mayor here, one to strengthen any prohibition on racial profiling. Did you need anything else on that post or position?
No, thank you.
All right. And I would also add that I spoke directly to the mayor's office in New Haven to assess Mr. Reichard's history there, including the things you bring up, and saw nothing in what I was able to examine that would lead me to feel that the Connecticut Chiefs Association or our personnel office made any error in classifying him as the highest qualified applicant for this post. Anyone who serves in the rumble-tumble of urban politics and urban policing over a long and extended period is bound to have something here or there that might be questioned. If they didn't, I think they probably did nothing in their decades of service. But I talked directly to the mayor's office, and the mayor's office has extended through me to you an open invitation to call them to verify that Mr. Reichard retired under good circumstances with no blemishes on his record internally.
Can we just clarify, Mr. Reichard, were you asked to turn in your gun and badge, as this report said?
It's a standard procedure when you retire to turn in a gun.
Before you retired, you were not...
Pardon me?
You weren't asked to turn them in before you retired?
No, I didn't.
I would also add, because I did hear that today popping up out there, that even when we retired, former Deputy Chief Seeger, on that Wednesday, he was asked on the spot to turn in his gun and his badge, and he left the building shortly thereafter. This is standard policy and procedure, particularly when you deal with law enforcement. When the 2 captains retired on their retirement dates, they also turned in their gun, their badge, and their ID when they signed their retirements. Indeed, Captain Lacey turned in his badge and his ID in my office the moment he signed his retirement, and I didn't even ask him to. He just did it automatically. So this is standard policy, this is standard procedure. Even when I worked in the City of New York, if a legislative analyst were relieved or laid off, they would do the same thing. You would turn everything in on the spot, out the door.
So the press reports at the time that said that he was relieved of his duties, asked to turn in his badge and his gun, and then later retired were wrong. That basically he retired and then was asked to turn in his badge and his gun. Is that, do we have the press accounts wrong at that time?
On a Friday afternoon, I met with the chief, or Friday morning, I met with the chief of police. I announced to him that I was retiring. Monday, I submitted my paperwork for retiring.
One more. How many applicants did you have, and is there any concern that the city council will not fund this position for next fiscal year?
In terms of applicants, I'll refer that to Bernadette, how many we had total initially,
We had 29 applicants.
which was cut down to a final
Of
list.
those 29, 6 were the Chiefs of Police Association vetted them, and they determined that only 6, the top 6 would be, go through the oral examination.
And then after the oral examination, we came to
5 were
5.
recommended, and incoming Deputy Chief Reichard was the top scoring candidate and the highest recommended by the Police Chiefs Association.
I would say to your second point that it would come as an absolute shock to anyone who's been involved in this hiring process that this position would be examined for elimination after the timeline that I gave you, from January 4th to April 20th. This was very publicly done and everyone knew it was coming, and we never heard anything from anyone that this would be considered or that we should not hire this post. I believe the position is vital, and I believe it would be a profound mistake, particularly at this time with so many vacancies in the department, with a restructuring ongoing in the department, to target this particular position in the broad confines of the budget. I think there are other areas that we can find to make reductions, and some I already suggested even when I presented my budget. I have meetings tomorrow with the Council President Pro Tem, and the staff of the Council and the staff of the administration, and we will have frank discussions, I'm sure. There is a Finance Committee meeting tomorrow, and we'll see how the process plays out. But the budget process is still ongoing, but I believe that there are other areas where we can find agreement to make responsible reductions without jeopardizing public safety in the city of New London.
And one of those I've heard is the dog program. Is that something that you expect the council to cut?
There was a discussion, as you know, you covered the committee meeting.
Well, based on your recommendation.
Yeah, the budget that I submitted included full funding for the dog program.
Right.
There was no intention to cut the program. We wanted to fund existing services as they stood and present to the council a legitimate budget that was legitimately and honestly balanced to fund the services we have right now. And that was what we did. And a lot of people don't like the price tag, and I understand and appreciate that. But it's a real price tag for the government we have today. If we want to cut back, we can do that in a cooperative manner. And at a Public Safety Committee meeting, the question was raised about the dog program. The meeting was called to discuss the restructuring in the department, in particular the departures of the deputy chief and 2 police captains. But over 3/4 of the hearing was devoted to the dog program, at the end of which Councilor Spercacci asked for a white paper about the program and whether we could financially afford it, whether there were other means. So my office then diligently prepared the report and submitted it to him, saying that there are other departments that can provide us with dogs, that we do not need necessarily our own independent program, that there is also alarming racial disparity in the bite statistics, which are a cause of concern that far outweigh the racial statistics for normal arrests in the city of New London. And the recommendation that came from the department was that it might be best to just eliminate the program, and if necessary to have any kind of program, start from scratch, and perhaps look for alternative funding sources for a program. So that was my recommendation to the council, but it's totally up to the council whether they choose to act on that or not. As I say, my initial budget included funding for the program.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Reichard, where did you work? What was the name of the place you worked at?
Bank of America.
Bank of America? And what division?